We all want our guitar to sound at its best whenever we play it, and this video is going to show us how thinking about string tension can help us achieve that. So the overall tone of your guitar really is down to the luthier that made it, and the decisions they made during the design process, but it's the strings which add the finishing touches and add that kind of sparkle or shimmer to the overall sound that can either make or break a recording, so it's really important to choose the right strings for the right situation. In this video we'll be exploring medium-high, high and super high tension strings, which are commonly found in the live concert and commercial recording industries. The strings you'll hear throughout all the examples have been supplied by Knobloch Strings, who have kindly sponsored this video, and the guitar I'll be playing will be a 1A Fusion by luthier Stephen Hill. So the three different types of musical material we're about to hear are going to be strummed, sustained melodies and harmonics, and altered tunings. Each example will start with a combination of super high tension basses combined with medium tension trebles, then super high tension basses combined with super high tension trebles, and then finally high tension basses combined with high tension trebles. So let's get started. So that's the excerpt done. I'd be very interested to hear what differences everybody heard between the strings, because they are very, very subtle. So personally for me, 50% of the difference between the strings was actually how they felt to play, and the other 50% obviously was the tone difference between them. So let's take ourselves through the differences that I personally perceived, and as I say, I'd be very interested to hear the differences that other people perceived as well. So we started the strummed section with the super high basses and the medium high trebles, and overall it felt very easy to play in the left hand. The strings felt nice and soft for holding the chords. Sound wise, there was a nice clank and sort of a shimmer to the tone when I was strumming the chords, and I think overall it had kind of a traditional Spanish guitar sound. So we then changed to the super high tension trebles with the super high tension basses, and the overall tone in the top end changed. The clicks weren't as pronounced in the top end, they had a slightly softer timbre to them, and the actual tone of the notes within the chords were more pronounced. So it was kind of tone over click when we put the super high tension trebles on. So we then changed to the high tension basses with the high tension trebles, and overall the tone was kind of sweeter or mellower, and but there was a nice kind of attack still from the clicks, but with a nice kind of warm tone overall. So we started the next excerpt with the medium high tension trebles with the super high tension basses, and overall there was a nice kind of light tone in the top end with a nice kind of warmth in the bass end. So we then changed to the super high tension trebles with the super high tension basses, and overall the tone was a lot more pronounced in the top end, especially from the harmonics. Using the same technique, the harmonics were kind of popping out of the sound a lot more easily. So without having to do any more practice, my harmonics were instantly improved. So I do recommend those. And as we were using the super high trebles, there was more overtones in the overall sound, which is something you can kind of expect from carbon-based, high tension strings. And we then changed to the high tension trebles with the high tension basses, and the overall sound there was a lot more natural. The overtones had kind of dropped out during that excerpt, and so the overall tone of the guitar actually was quite natural and quite warm, which I really liked. We then moved into the altered tuning example, which is something more familiar for me because I spend most of my time in some kind of altered tuning. So for me, this is where the strings really started to stand out for me. So we started with the medium high tension trebles and the super high tension basses, and for me the overall tone was very responsive, and there was a nice prominent bass tone in the bass end, and I really like the balance between the top end and the low end. It seemed very kind of flat across the board there. And then we changed to the super high trebles with the super high basses, and as expected with the high tension trebles, the harmonics were popping out a lot more easily, and overall there was a really strong tone to the guitar. And for both the medium high tension trebles and the super high tension trebles, I did really like the balance between those and the super high tension basses. I think the tone for both were prominent enough for kind of recording or performing with. And then finally we changed to the high tension trebles with the high tension basses, and the overall tone again was very natural with the high tension strings. I really like the overall tone, but unfortunately because of the nature of the detuning of this excerpt, I think the bottom string goes to drop B, the high tension strings didn't actually offer enough tension to prevent the strings from being kind of clanky when detuned. So these particular strings weren't suitable, and you could hear it in the final chord of that excerpt. It kind of clanked and broke tone. So yeah, the high tension strings might not necessarily be suitable for super detuned pieces of music. Okay, so that's all the differences that I heard covered. So there may be plenty more out there that I didn't pick up on that you may have heard yourself. So I'll be very interested in hearing from you if that's the case. Leave your comments below. So these are pro grade strings. Okay, these are pro grade strings that have their own applications, and the differences we're hearing between the medium all the way through to the super high are differences that you'll kind of see in other brands of strings where they have their range of medium through to super high. But obviously these are kind of hybrid carbon nylon strings that have their own kind of tone going on, which is why I really like these strings actually. But yeah, as I say, the differences between the strings create their own kind of applications, so it's really important to kind of consider the right string tension for the right job in hand. So the medium high and the high tension strings both offer quite a soft, kind of rounded and natural guitar tone. The mediums are obviously softer than the highs, so they're kind of easier to play. They're easier under your fingers, but obviously they don't offer as punchy a tone as the high tensions do. So with great power comes great responsibility. The super high tension strings really produce a really punchy, big sound, but the one slight drawback to that is you get this slight overtone sound within the guitar sound, and this is something you get across all brands of the super high tension strings. But yeah, if that's not an issue for you, it's great to have such a big punchy sound. So overtones are great for having a loud sound in performance, but maybe not as suitable for when you've got the microphones really up close to the guitar, because the overtones become a little bit louder the closer you get to the guitar. And another point to make with the super high tension strings is that they are a lot more firmer under your left hand, under your fret hand, and because of that you can expect some fresh calluses if you're used to having quite soft strings under your hand. But there's lots of steel string players out there playing with much firmer strings than us nylon string players, so if they can do it, so can we. So the great thing about super high tension strings is, yeah, they might be tense under your left hand when you're in standard tuning, but if like me you spend a lot of time in altered tunings such as dadgad, when you've got the D string detuned, the B string down to an A, the top E string down to a D, when you've got all those detuned, it's very easy for those strings to get clanky. But when you've got super high strings on, when you've got super high tension strings on, the strings still are very taut and have a really strong punchy tone, so they're perfect for altered tuning material. So to really summarise here, there's two main areas of guitar performance. There is the live performance, and then there's the recording. So where live performance is concerned, I really recommend, in order to get the most out of your guitar, in terms of getting the biggest tone and the biggest projection out of your instrument, I really recommend the super high tension basses with the super high tension trebles. But obviously the drawback there is it's a little bit firmer under your fret hand. So for those of you that aren't used to doing combinations of tensions between your trebles and your basses, I really recommend splitting them. So stick with the super high tension basses and maybe try a softer like high tension or medium high tension treble, just to take that edge off, and you'll find that you still have this big projection but a nice balance between your trebles and your basses. And finally, for recording, when you've got those microphones up close, I really recommend staying away from the super high tension trebles just because of the aforementioned overtones, but using the super high tension basses when you're in an altered tuning, when you've got some detuned notes in the bass. But otherwise, for a natural sound, when you've got those microphones up close, I recommend staying with the high tension trebles and basses, or the medium high tension trebles and basses. So as a final point, I think it's worth mentioning that these are all kind of my own personal recommendations in terms of what works for me, and I know that won't necessarily work for others. But if you haven't done so already, it's really worth experimenting between different tensions of your trebles and your basses, and finding something that really works for you as an artist and as a player. Okay, that's it for this video. If you've got this far, thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Knobloch for sponsoring this video, and thank you especially to Stephen Hill for building me this beautiful guitar that I could test the strings out on. So if you're still watching this video, I presume that means you are a guitarist. Actually, if you're not a guitarist and you're still watching this video, why are you watching this video? Anyway, I'd like to take this opportunity to announce my first ever YouTube tutorial video series that will be going out in about 2 weeks' time. Full details are below in the description. So this YouTube series is really about the foundations of technique and what's really important to be considering almost as a physicist come player. So I think it's really important to have the physics of what you do as a guitarist down to kind of further enhance your overall musicality as an artist. So as I say, links in the description below. If you like this video, like, share, all that stuff. Thanks so much for listening. Cheers.